So, welcome back again to Symbiotic Futures. We're going to continue our conversation. We were before talking about waste in general, defining waste and talking about waste, how it haunts us, and how it's important to learn how to live with it, and why. And that's just that defines our ecological condition today. So my question further is, in your work, you also talk about we need to question how to learn to eat, digest, and waste well. And you draw on the Australian eco-philosopher, feminist Val Plumwood's story of encountering a crocodile. And she was reminded of her human edibility, and this invited me to reimagine myself or as humans, not as being superior. And it's just we're just part of a food chain. So what might it be like to live with this awareness, and why is it important to be reminded of our edibility, practically, ethically, or existentially?
Yeah. Um, the what is so striking about that encounter with a crocodile that really put things into focus for Val Plumwood is that she was already very much an environmental philosopher when she actually met the crocodile midway the 1980s. She was out canoeing, and then there was this crocodile in the water. And only later reflecting on that encounter, and mind you, she barely escaped. So I think he bit her in her leg, and in the end she survived, but it was quite something. And later on, she realized that at the moment when she met the gaze of the crocodile, or met the eye of the crocodile, um, uh, she thought this must be a case of mistaken identity because I'm a human being. I cannot be eaten. Knowing full well, she was already aware of the dangers of anthropocentrism, of course. Had I'm not really sure, but I think she already published about that prior to this moment. But still, she thought this must be a case of mistaken identity. And so it's quite deep, this human exceptionalism. It runs very deep.
Right.
So in a way, it reminds us. So I know very well that I'm edible, that I'm vulnerable, that I'm an ecological being, but still, I act as if this is not the case. So there is disavowal going on here. It is, you might know that it's the case, but actually staying with it, that might be also a painful insight, or it is quite hard. And this, I think, is one of the reasons why we have to remind ourselves of that deep existential truth. We're vulnerable. Also, we're mortal. She could have been eaten. I think this is important, especially nowadays when there are many people who really seem to believe that immortality or near immortality is an option, is even something to aspire. Um, I would say this is, yeah, some weird kind of anti-ecological insulist thoughts. Uh, Elon Musk perhaps really believing that he could, I don't know, disattach from Earth and then go live in Mars one way or another. I cannot really it won't I cannot really imagine that working. But there's this deep sense of detachment from your environment, the possibility to insulate yourself, to indeed go live on Mars or on an island, but then some with a big mountain for when the sea levels rise. Yeah, make sure that you survive while others don't. Um, so this is so in times of ecological crisis, which I would say is spurred mainly by these technologically driven, yeah, eco-modernist, techno-optimist fantasies. It's very important to keep reminding yourself of your edibility, your vulnerability in this instance. Um, I would also like to tie it to the notion that uh, the notion of eating one's mother, metrotrophy. I think this is how to pronounce it. It's put forth by Sims in, I don't know, a decade, maybe even already 2 decades ago. And she urges us to think from eating one's mother, also because, yeah, so this is where it starts from. We start by eating from our mothers. We're in their wombs, and via the placenta, we're eating from our mothers. And nowadays, we're not just getting nutrients that way, we also get microplastics, PFAS, um, many other things that get through the placenta, perhaps even change the placenta. So we tended to imagine placentas like barriers that shield children from the outer environment, but we find that they're not barriers, that things get through. And then, of course, later on, our mothers feed us breast milk. Yeah, or not, because this is the thing nowadays. Um, One of the things that I immediately thought about when I read about um, eggs being so full of PFAS nowadays, so eggs from free-range chickens, that we are advised by the government to just stop eating them. Um, there might come a time when certain mothers are advised to not breastfeed their children because it's just too toxic, too unhealthy. There's just too many non-nourishing things in that milk. Um, I think this is a very, very painful truth.
Yeah.
So it's and I think that trying to grapple with the ecological crisis we find ourselves in is about trying to stay, to put it in Haraway's terms, with these dark ecological troubles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then also realizing that I personally would perhaps like to buy my way out of that. And if I'm rich, perhaps I can go live in a different place and eat different things, drink different things, breathe different air. But that's just very unjust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And in the end, there won't be, of course, these clean places left,
yeah.
which we can try to insulate ourselves
Yeah.
into, because, of course, homes are haunted. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I also read about how whales are being affected as well, whale breast milk, and how it's also super toxic, and it's being passed on to future generations. And in a book called Among Whales, the author also kind of was worried about this idea of pollution and how whales pass on these chemicals onto their calves, and maybe ultimately there will be no more whales. So it's
Yeah.
also, I can see it the same for happening for humans, and yeah, that's pretty scary thought. Uh,
Yeah, but it's good. It's good that you bring in the whales here. I think, of course, when I try to myself engage with the real ecology and the real of this ecological crisis, this for me is a way in. It can get very it gets very close and ugly and etc. But it's important also, in light of the anthropocentrism that we've been discussing, that we not think only of ourselves, but
mhm.
that we also think of other breastfeeding creatures, which indeed include whales. Of course, they're mammals too.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then it might be easier for me to think of monkeys breastfeeding, and then it's like, oh shit, of course they have the same problem, but of course in the ocean it must be way worse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think so.
because of the bio accumulation and biomagnification
Hmm.
going on by yeah.
Yeah,
And here again, so we're reminded how important it is to think in terms of so eating well,
yeah,
because yeah, not just for us humans but also for whales, there are indeed when you think from eating and eating well, these intergenerational heritages come into view,
yeah,
also these physical heritages. Yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
you also argue for an ethics of eating and wasting generously, and you
yeah,
reject the capitalistic logics of, what's popular today of the circular economy, closed loop solutions, uh, and you say that these solutions reproduce the extractive systems of taking from the earth and continuous just taking, consuming. But in a world where waste accumulates uncontrollably within our bodies and outside, um, there is no such thing as purity. So, how can we still give ourselves back generously in life or in
yeah,
death when we ourselves, we are not pure? Yeah.
yeah. um this is a question that will be haunting me. So I've tried to give some kind of preliminary answer, but I'm not there yet. So why thinking in terms of generosity? So for one, within the generous, we find generations too. The giving of life, giving birth. It's in there logically. So when I say I want to waste well or give to eat well or give to eat generously, um, I'm saying I would like to give to eat and waste well in a way that gives life. This might be unexpected life. It needn't necessarily be human life, but I would say the most pressing question nowadays is that of so will life be passed on? We're living in an age of extinctions, plural. And the main question, I would say, therefore, should be, so what drives this lessening of life, this not, yeah, this not giving life, this lessening of this exhausting of life, and how can we perhaps, yeah, take take a different route there? Um, um, I have no, so I've started answering that question. This notion of generosity is important also because um, it defies a capitalist logic that is always about closed loops, but also equal exchange. When I give generously, I'm not interested in equal exchange. It's not like, so I'm giving you so, and now I want something back. It's um, there are gifts given and not necessarily, or yeah, the notion of the gift is a difficult one, of course. There's much debate on if the giving of gifts is not in the end also about some kind of equal exchange, because I give something to you and I expect something back. So we'll leave the gift out for now, but the generosity, if I'm generous, then there's I don't know, this kind of spillover, but in a good way. I'm just trying to give as much life as I can. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I think that's important. Important, yeah, important in times of extinction. So how can we imagine this generosity, and how might this uh, provide some kind of pathway out of this time of extinction
Hmm.
uh, into a less exhausting time?
Yeah, it's in a way a way to a way of rebelling against systems that, well, you talk about how we're consuming from before we're born, consuming from a mother. We're born and we're just taking from the world. We're in this. system that just kind of, we're, at least for now, because we're consuming in a way that's unsustainable, it's taking a toll on the planet and other species and on our own bodies as well. But thinking of ways to give back, and that too generously is a way that kind of tries to break the system. At least that's how I read it.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the routes I would like to take, but I haven't properly started doing this, is so how has generosity been thought about throughout time all over the globe? So
Yeah,
not um,
it's
yeah,
kind of,
getting into other thought traditions, because I found already I haven't done a proper, I don't know, search of the literature, or perhaps even oral traditions where this is concerned. It might not be all in writing, and the notion of reciprocity keeps popping up all over the place.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, so that's an interesting route to take. Um, uh, Always being mindful, of course, that mm, I'm I'm always scared that I kind of exploit and then in fact reinforce some kind of status quo anyway. Also when I try to, I don't know, try and be nourished by different thought traditions, always be mindful how you go about that.
Mhm.
Um, and also, um, it's interesting that in the past years, or perhaps a decade already, there have already organisms have formed that can actually deal with uh, several kinds of waste. So plastics, especially, there have been fungi and bacteria developing who can kind of eat plastic,
Mhm.
and um, this this is hopeful in a way. So I don't know, we don't have to, the anthropos doesn't need to decide on ways of eating well and designing for that, striving for some kind of control. Uh, Once again, but yeah, but there's a danger here of trying to get all these organisms now in line, perhaps in lab conditions, help them eat even better, and then have them clean up our mess,
Mhm.
um, keep on doing that while the, I don't know, the tap is still on.
Yeah.
So we're only then dealing with the symptoms,
Mhm.
not with the illness
Mhm.
itself. I think that's a very important one.
Yeah, you
So
leave.
this is something that I try to explore also in that final chapter on eating well. That there's that thinking from, I don't know, so literal eating, trying to design or help other organisms eat better, can be a dangerous one too, because then once again you're reinforcing the status quo.
Yeah.
You don't need to stop producing plastics because the organisms will take care of it.
Yeah. You leave the responsibility again to the planet and to other creatures
Yeah.
to deal with
Yeah,
your waste.
once again, there's another vulnerable community that's supposed to take care of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
perhaps it's, I don't know, it can be a bit weird to think of bacteria like organ. Well, they're communities in their own way.
Mhm.
I think that the bacteria living in our guts, I think we already started relating to those as communities in their
Yeah.
own rights. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
and then they um, they need to be lived with.
Mhm.
Yeah, and not be put to work, make productive. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so, as you suggest, we are living in a slow extinction. So there are cycles of consumption, production, dumping, and you ask, does any, it's important to question, will anything come after the dump? Or is it
yeah,
going to be a full stop? So from the old question, you take, the philosophical question of how should we live, and you turn it into something more urgent, which is will we live? So how does living in this extinction era reshape our existential and ethical frameworks? That's one part. And how can we reflect on this without falling into despair or even false hope? Because, as you say, the question of where to go from here
Yeah.
shows like the exhausted situation that we're currently living in. Maybe this present has no futures, but you still ask nonetheless, what kind of futures can be carved out, and does it make sense still to think and imagine futures?
Yeah. Um, I take my cue there from the German philosopher Günther Anders. So he, in the 1950s, reflecting on the atomic age he was then living in, he argued that this fear of an all-out atomic war that was then from then on, because and it is still a reality, um, led to this switch in this ethical question turning also in an existential question. So in that, how should we live? Very much an ethical question to will we live? Although I would say that um, he doesn't let go of the ethical question. He just adds this existential question to it. It's a deeply ethical question still. And what Gunther Anders tried to do has tried to do in many of his work is get a feel for responsibility, how to take responsibility also individually, um, when you're dealing with something that you can neither control or fully control, because I don't decide on flipping the switch or the pushing the button, nor perhaps fully understand. Is the end of the world because of an atomic bomb? Is that something that we can actually fathom? And he argues it's supraliminal. So we know about subliminal messages, so they're so tiny you can't register and you cannot understand, but there's also supraliminal, so it's too big to fathom. um but how to try and fathom it anyway, and act in a certain way, take responsibility. This was for him a very important question. um I think this question is interesting still, in times of ecological crisis, and but the difficulty here is, of course, that once again we're dealing with something that we cannot really fathom. But the ecological crisis at the same, but it's extended in space and time. It's not like this one event that we cannot really fathom, like an atomic war. It's, I don't know, there in the background shaping our lives anyway, because it could happen. And that wasn't an option before. But of course, the ecological crisis is a slow creeping extinction, and still, and in its own way, difficult to understand, difficult to get a feel for. But perhaps, so this question of will we live gets more tangible and pressing, I would say, when we think from these toxic wombs or these toxic breasts, breast milk. Um, there might be some unfathomability to it still, but it really is less abstract. It gets quite concrete. Not like then after. So again, there's this brushing question: will we live? It's still there. You're unsure. Well, one thing we know is that it makes little sense to say we just need a little less plastic. If if we want to keep on living, the stream of plastic seeping into our world, which is oil, it needs to stop. The use of pesticides, the production of pesticides, it needs to stop. The production of all these forever chemicals. There's So here, the existential and the ethical also leads to political implications and answers. Um, and then at least you can be clear about a policy that is just about kind of mitigating. Yeah, no, plastics is fine. Just, I don't know, maybe a bit less. That's
Hmm.
all rubbish. It will deepen extinction.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so yeah. So when did we start thinking in terms of, well, a little toxication, that's fine. So
Hmm.
there are these how to call them?
Like
Like
upper limits,
boundaries, yeah, or thresholds, and
thresholds.
then below this threshold, it's fine. We can just have
Yeah.
a bit of PFAS, that's fine. Because this is also something that we learned because of the nitrogen crisis, for example, also in the Netherlands. Um, it can also it's already too much. It's always already too much.
Yeah.
So this whole thinking in terms of some kind of baseline and
Mhm.
then or threshold and then below it's fine.
Yeah.
It's
So
dangerous. Yeah.
in the for the question of thinking about futures or imagining futures, do you think that's still important? Amid the realities, political realities of the world and also existential realities of the world. Like if we want to
I
think
think,
about
yeah.
futures, what do you think, in your opinion, it's important to keep in mind, while imagining these futures?
Um, I think that the most important thing is to keep on asking, so what kind of future will this present lead to? So how can we, if we extrapolate this future and try and imagine how it will be in 20, 40, 100 years times when nothing changes in this situation, what kind of future will we have?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this tells you something about where is this a viable future? No. Okay, let's try and imagine a different one. So of course, um, um, I think it's important to not to always try and start from the present and not from some imagined future that you will strive to achieve, because I would say that we learn again and again that if there is something that we strive towards, some kind of goal, this utopia that we try to achieve, we disregard the rubble, the waste, the what sacrifices that need to be made in able to achieve that goal. It,
Yeah.
it works like that every time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's why I think so. So of course, futures play a role, the way in which we imagine futures to be, but also always start from the present and always look around and look back,
Yeah.
like the angel of history that Walter Benjamin, the German philosopher, coined in his work on the concept of history. This angel of history is blown into the future because we want to go to the future, progress. Hoo-hoo. But the angel is turned backwards, and he only sees the rubble.
Mm-hmm.
He only sees the sacrifices
Yeah.
made by the vulnerable in name of progress. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is why I'm always um, a bit hesitant, yeah, where the future is
Yeah.
uh, concerned as some kind of dream world utopia that we should try and realize.
Yeah. So in a way, to
Yeah,
link it to your haunted metaphor, I would imagine that you shouldn't imagine a future without first reminding yourself of what you're being haunted by, and through that lens, because that bring like that makes you want that draws you to be aware of the situation that you're living in and what came before you, in order to think of where to go from here.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
And so will you be haunted in the future? Will there, considering the present as it is now, I don't know, as ever turning into some kind of future, can you imagine there being future beings that you will have tried to take responsibility for?
Hmm.
Yeah. So considering your actions now, individually, collectively, um, uh, trying to take responsibility. Um, uh, can you imagine that having worked and they in the future being thankful, perhaps or not? Just I don't know. This is the way life goes. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Will there be even future beings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, on that note, thank you
Yes.
again for your time and being here and sharing your insights. And maybe we see you again next time.